In this video, I will provide you with a simple and effective method that can be used to figure out the post heights for each one of the concrete support piers. And keep in mind that the example I'm using here is an old home, and you might be working with a different concrete pad, a different layout, or even different structural support methods. So the first thing I am going to do will be to install a string, and I like to use nylon string, and I also have a video on how to install the string, make it tight, and hopefully straight enough so that you can use it to create a nice straight line for your floor beam. So here we go. We've put it right on top of the top plate, and the string will need to be touching the top of the top plate. And if for whatever reason you're having a difficult time with it, install the nail or screw on this side, and then that should solve your problem. So we are going to have a straight line here that we can use to measure the distance between the top of the string and the top of the building foundation support pad. So that will be the distance from the top to the string, and then we will simply subtract the width of the beam. Or you can grab a scrap piece of lumber or cut your own scrap piece of lumber that will represent the same height, and then measure from the top of that to the string, and that way you won't have to do any mathematical calculations, because sometimes it can get a little confusing to do something like this. For example, I've done it before where I worked on another project recently where we had a 4x8, and then I went over to the next project and we had a 4x10. And without doing this right here, I remember cutting my first post a little too tall. So again, just another thing you can use if you're going to have that situation. However, if you are going to be using a post base connector and a top post to beam connector, then you will also need to subtract for that distance, or again, use this type of a setup, or come up with something that will work just as well. But whatever you do, just don't forget to subtract whatever you need to make everything work out okay. And again, I'm going to provide you with a way to double check everything after we look at one more installation method where you might have a board underneath the post, and if that's the case, you're going to need to add that material so that you can get the correct post height. And that might look something like this. So it's not uncommon in an older home to have a board on the bottom where someone might have even drove a couple of nails through the board into the concrete. Or in some cases, it's just simply attached to the post sitting on top of the concrete pad. And hopefully this makes sense now that you're looking at it, where we had the scrap piece of the beam sitting on top of a block that would represent the thickness we were going to use for this board, the thickness for the beam, and then by measuring from the top of the string to the top of the two boards that we had here, we would get the measurement for the post. And if this doesn't make sense and you're working on a project like this, make sure that you cut one post and double check everything. And don't get carried away with this project. You know, I can't believe how many times I've seen carpenters cut a bunch of stuff and then it's incorrect. And you don't want to have that happen to you. So this would be a more common situation for this type of setup in the construction world today, where we have a post base connector that would either be bolted, nailed, or screwed to the post along with the top connector. And again, I'm just trying to provide you with a few more ideas for situations that you might run into while working on either a new project or remodeling an older one. Now, to double check everything, we're simply going to grab two boards that are exactly the same size and nail them to the top of the sill framing plates at each end, and then set the string up in the same way we did before with either a nail or a screw. And what this does, if we were to leave it like it was, if we left the string on top of the sill framing plate and one section of the assembly was raised just a little bit, then that section would lift the string up, making it difficult sometimes to check to see if it's actually straight. Where in a situation like this, where we have the string a little bit higher and the beam was up a little bit, we could simply measure the distance here, which should be the exact same distance as the thickness of the block. For example, if I'm using an 1.5" 2x4 and this measurement here was 1.25", then I would know that this was 1/4 inch too tall. And if it was 1 3/4 inches, then I would know that I would need to raise this up 1/4 inch. And again, this is an excellent way to double check everything. And I'm not about to suggest that you can't use some type of builder's level or lasers that they have today. However, if those lasers are out of calibration, they're not working perfectly, then you could have a problem. And I really think today what I would do if I had both tools is I would still use the string. And another thing you can do for those of you perfectionists out there might be to run a string from this side to this side over every section where you're going to have your concrete piers. And if for whatever reason that doesn't make sense, you're not really getting what I'm talking about, let me know and I'll make another video on that.